This podcast is brought to you by Kiwi Design, the leader in MetaQuest and VR accessories. And now you can deck out your device while supporting the podcast. The MetaQuest 2 is a great headset, but do you ever feel things could be a bit more comfortable? Well, we have the solution for you. With lens protectors, controller grips, face covers, head straps, link cables, headset stands, and more, including my two personal favorites, the top version controller grips with added weight and an extended handle, and the Kiwi upgraded Elite strap. Let's be real, we've all whacked our controller. Don't be the guy messaging Oculus support for your own mistake or waiting weeks for an out-of-stock controller. Visit the link in our show notes to prepare yourself today. After visiting the link in our show notes, make sure to use the promo code Ruff Talk VR at checkout, all one word, to take full advantage of your savings. And make sure to click the link in our show notes so the podcast gets credit and you help support us. Remember, whatever you need, Kiwi has you covered. Hey, welcome to this episode of Ruff Talk VR. Today we have one I'm so excited for.
I say this every week, though, when we interview someone. I'm like, I'm so excited for this one. And then another week happens and you get more excited for this one and the next one. So this one truly is even more exciting than some.
Yeah, I'd actually put this one. I have the feeling it's going to be on our Hall of Fame of interviews that we reference back to. You know, you look at like the interviews with like Chris Pruitt and stuff like that. You know, we always reference back to it. Mm-hmm. And today we're joined with Amanda Watson, the creator of Airlink. You know, you're not currently working at Meta, but you're still the creator of Airlink.
Can't take that away. No,
that's a hell of an accolade. You know, anybody who uses their Quest 2 for PCVR using, you know, they know virtual desktop and they know Airlink, you know, they're going to be very familiar with that software. So to say that you have done a good service for, you know, the PC
VR community.
Yeah. The people love Airlink. So before I get too carried away, Amanda, do you mind to introduce yourself a little bit more for our listeners? Maybe tell them a little bit about, you know, who you are and what exactly Airlink is in case they're standalone Quest 2 only.
Sure, absolutely. Hey guys, my name is Amanda Watson. I am a VR software engineer. Kind of what I do is I specialize in like weird little low-level performance hacks most of the time. But at Meta, I was the creator of Airlink. I worked at Oculus/Facebook/Meta doing VR software for about 7 years. And I don't know, I guess the things to know about me is I'm really passionate about VR and we'll talk about it a lot. And I guess the thing to know about. So do you want like a description of what Airlink is?
Yeah, that wouldn't hurt, I guess. I mean, we're familiar with it, but maybe
like if someone's never heard it, first time they're ever hearing the word Airlink, mm-hmm. and they go, well, what is this that you speak of?
They just bought a Quest 2 last week, you know?
Just bought a Quest 2 last week. Okay, so there are two categories of VR. There's standalone VR and PCVR. PCVR, you've got to plug it into a PC, but it's got access to the Oculus PC library of content and the Steam VR library of content. Standalone, you don't need a PC. It's totally wireless, but your content is limited to what's going to run on the chipset on the device, and you're often limited as far as the store is concerned as well. Link was a piece of technology that enabled you to plug your Quest or your Quest 2 into a PC and have it kind of emulate a PCVR headset and access the same library of content that a PCVR headset would. Airlink is similar technology, but you don't have to plug in anything at all. It works over your home Wi-Fi network instead of USB. This is basically the best of both worlds as far as a lot of people are concerned, because you get the wireless freedom of standalone. You can access whatever you want.
Oh, that's huge. You know, the transition to wireless has been, you know, very clear. Once you go wireless, it's very hard to
be tethered.
Yeah, and there is a group of people that go, hey, I don't mind the wire, but in terms of like, you know, mass adaptation, you know, it's way easier to convince somebody going wireless, you know, no pulley systems, nothing like that. So was VR something that, you know, you got into through work, or, you know, what was your first experience in VR? How did you even, you know, discover this world?
Well, the first way I discovered this world was probably, I went to a tech meetup and saw the DK1 for the first time and got to try, it was Rift Coaster specifically. And, you know, it's just so clear to me that this was, at least for me, much more exciting than anything else. Like, you know, you had to always tell me why like a Raspberry Pi demo was exciting, but I thought that the DK1 was this really incredible experience that existed without comment. And after that, I was in college. I was absolutely obsessed with VR, with Oculus, and specifically with getting a job at Oculus. It was all I could talk about for like an entire year. I was hyper fixated. And one of the problems was that Oculus didn't have entry level positions at the time, at least not for the areas I was interested in. All of them had positions that were like 8 years experience. So I spent that year kind of plotting how I was going to like bump into somebody and convince them that I should work there too, because I could do as good of a job as the older guys.
That's huge. So networking was your way in, no doubt. That's awesome to.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's
Well, you got to be persistent. I mean, that's kind of what I'm taking away. You can't one and done it, or you'd never get your opportunity. So
well, and look at the ripple effect that came with it. Now
yeah.
we have services like Airlink, so that's huge. So was Oculus kind of like your first thing right out of college, or did you have other?
Yeah. It was my first job right out of college.
So you never veered off the path then of saying I'm going to work for.
I love
for
that.
Oculus. I'm working for Oculus.
I love that. That's
awesome.
Huge. And so you said that you were with them for 8 years?
7.
Wow, that must have gone by in a blink. That means that you saw the transition from Facebook to obviously the transition over to Meta the last couple of years, but also the slow integration of Oculus kind of becoming just Meta in general.
Yeah.
So prior to Airlink, what were some of the things? Are you able to talk about like what else you did, at Meta or formerly Facebook, prior to Airlink coming out?
Sure. So I started by working on Gear VR in Dallas. I worked on the SDK and the runtime. One of the things I worked on during that time was GLTF. So some of my talks still come up in my Google searches. And then after that, I worked on sort of the standalone department. I was on Quest very early in its development and the Go as well. I worked on the Core OS for probably the majority of my career at the company. And then later on, I worked on Oculus Link as part of a team. My main thing there was to just make sure the controllers felt really good and smooth. And that was what I did before Airlink.
That's so, geez.
Modestly put.
Yeah. Yeah. I always love how humble people are about their own work. But so you're somebody that, your first experience with VR was the DK1. You've used the Go, you've used the Quest 1, obviously the Quest 2 as well.
I'm going to guess used them all.
Yeah. To say you're an OG is definitely, I think, a fair statement to say. So somebody who's kind of seen the development of VR, starting just PCVR and then, the Go and the Quest 1 and 2, are you mainly, as a user, do you mainly do PCVR or do you like the standalone aspect more?
I really do both. And I like a lot of the old titles as well, old and new. I've been trying to get into more Quest specific because since I left Meta, I haven't set up a new PC. So I've been playing more the newer standalone and App Lab games than I was in the past.
And so this is something I always love to actually ask too. So it sounds like you do play VR. Sometimes we talk to people and they work in VR so much in development and stuff like that.
It's not their spare time.
Yeah, they don't want to go home and put on the headset. But it sounds like you're quite a big fan still of VR, even after.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good excuse. I don't know why they're saying that.
So what are some of your favorite experience? Obviously, there's recency bias. Like, whatever you've been playing recently is probably going to pop in your head. But
oh, yeah. Well, I think if like every category aside, I would say probably my favorite one is Blaze Rush. I played it like in the beginning. I'm still playing it now. I played through the entire game. There's a lot of games I'll say that are great that I've never actually finished. I finished that one and I go back and play it all the time.
So do you have the habit of like, you start a game and, then you hear about another one coming out or somebody recommends it and then you hop to that before you're done with the current one?
Yeah, that might be the reason.
Yeah, that's kind of how I gamed before we started the podcast. And then, needing to do a review of a game kind of made me sit down and
keeps you centered.
Yeah, maybe I don't need 100% complete it and find every single little item, but that definitely made me actually complete games. But other than that, I always had the problem of, playing a couple hours into a game and then a new game drops and then, oh shit, now I got to go try that out. Especially with,
VR world too. Sometimes it's not just one dropping. You can get a week, like we've seen happen twice now, where multiple games are dropping in that week.
Yeah, 2023, I say it every week, has been loaded with content. This past year with Barbaria, the Light Brigade, Breachers just came out. Not for broadcast, which, we just reviewed.
Yeah.
We love it. So, geez, yeah, especially with this past year. So kind of going back to Airlink, maybe we'll bounce it back and forth a little bit.
Can't help it.
Yeah, we've, mind wanders a bit. So how did Airlink kind of come to be? Were you the only one working on it, or was it, a project that you thought of? How did this come to be?
Yeah, so the story kind of goes, John Carmack kind of talked back in 2019 about a group of people working on wireless, and I wasn't part of that original group. I was working on Link at the time, and that group of people sort of came away and said that wireless VR streaming was impossible with modern technology, that they had sort of built something, they had tested all the available solutions, and they basically kind of concluded that anybody that likes PC VR streaming today probably like lives in a lab somewhere, that if you had normal wireless conditions, it didn't work at all. And in order to check whether that was true or not, you needed to own a PC and use it. So what I did is, when they said their piece, I created a new project and I called it Airlink, that was kind of designed to combat those assumptions and pass their tests. And I kind of, through that prototype, got some people to help me pitch it. And I continued to work on it over the next year, while that group and I continued to kind of put pitch decks together, until we finally got an audience with Boz. And Boz was like, yeah, this seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I can't even imagine
No,
how you
I'm hearing the names and I'm like, yeah.
And so I don't know if you already mentioned this. I'm sorry if you did, and I'm going back to something you already answered. I don't know if you mentioned what you went to school for. Like, I don't even know what field you would go to school for to create Airlink wireless technology.
I figured some sort of programming / engineering.
Went to school for computer science and theater.
Okay. Wow, and then that's quite the deviation. I mean, computer science is broad, so it's not like that's not related to computer science, but definitely like the wireless technology of Airlink is much more specialized. So
it wasn't my sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, please do.
It wasn't my specialty at all, but it seemed to me to be a really important thing to do at the time. I wanted to make sure that technology existed and people didn't like go on to think that you needed this extremely specialized system in order to do VR, because that had huge implications.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. We've been long-term watchers of VR. I remember when things first started coming out big in 2016, and I didn't have a PC VR ready rig, but I always watched the industry. But then Quest 1 comes out, and I'm like, I'm really watching the industry hard. Quest 2 drops, and it's a no-brainer. And so it took something like standalone to get people like me and him in here. And if there's not that development towards standalone, there's a certain audience that you'll never get, like people like, me and him, who don't have the PC VR ready computers. So, that focus of understanding that, things need to go standalone to wireless, like that's essential for the industry to hit new levels, I'll say, in my opinion. And so for somebody that this wasn't exactly what they went to school for, that sounds like a huge obstacle.
Sounds crazy is what it sounds like. But
so how long did this take? Was this a 6-month endeavor? Was this something you've been working on since the Quest 1? How long did this whole project take?
I don't really know. It's hard to say, because the development time wasn't really capped with how long it actually took. It took a lot of time to convince the company that wireless streaming was something we should even allow on the platform to begin with.
Wow. To me, it sounds like, and obviously hindsight's 2020, it's easy to look back and go, well, geez, that's how you get
Why
people.
wouldn't you have thought of that?
Yeah, but that's interesting to hear that there was that type of resistance.
Yeah.
But to you, it was kind of sounds like you were a little bit more biased towards the potential standalone, right?
Yeah, I think it was one of the problems is that a lot of the technology for latency mitigation in common VR systems is not very accessible to people. And so it's hard to think about. I think that a lot of people that are into VR know that latency is very important. And but they couldn't tell you, nobody's like had like a slick marketing term for, oh, well, like motion extrapolation and asynchronous time warp save you X milliseconds of latency. So people are kind of, I don't know, they think of it as being very fundamental, and that seems like something you can't change.
So this one's gonna be fun, definitely. So I mean, with that being said, what were kind of some of the challenges, maybe foreseen or unforeseen, that you kind of encountered while developing a technology like Airlink?
Sure. I think some of the foreseen problems were just the very wide amount of environments that you needed to be comfortable in, and it's very hard to know, especially when you're developing in 2020. It's just very hard to know what environments outside of your house look like. So that was something that I really tried to simulate as much as possible. I think an unforeseen issue for me was I had never actually built an app before. I'd always built like runtimes, I had built SDKs, but there were issues that are probably really obvious to people who've built apps before that were different for me, like kind of, setting up systems to report bugs and doing kind of maintenance things that made stability a little easier.
And so this next one, I'm sorry, was there something you were gonna?
Yeah, no, the motivation sometimes when I hear people talk and you start painting this whole picture of the motivation and self-drive that, not everyone's the same, but I'm actually wondering if, because I'm going back a little to when they said it couldn't be done, it's impossible. Do you think that's part of the reason that you took on that challenge, because someone said it was impossible? Or did
well, it wasn't like my job at all. I don't know. I just didn't like people saying this thing that was clearly wrong to me. And it seemed like really bad if nobody was ever going to correct it. So I don't know if that's like a good motivation. I don't think I had a motivation about like, making the ecosystem free for everybody. They were just wrong.
I think it's just awesome. So if it wasn't for that potential conversation or being told that, I mean, if you walked into a room and they were like, oh no, it's definitely possible, we'll be working on it, I question whether that same drive to even work on it would have been there versus it can't be done.
And credit to the
impossible.
Credit to the individual who hears that no
to take on and call it out as being possible. That's incredible.
Yeah, and to have the guts to go, like you said, that's not
incredible.
That wasn't your job, that's what you just did to not. We won't say to prove them wrong necessarily, but definitely you did. So that's huge, and I also love to hear that. Oftentimes when we talk with developers, community managers, stuff like that, people who work professionally in the world of VR, you can hear the passion in them. Like people aren't getting in the world of VR.
Not dragging feet. No,
they're not doing it to cash a paycheck. They're doing it because, like you said, you tried the DK1. You're like, I have to work at Oculus. Like, it became a drive, and you can hear that when people talk. And here we are talking to a former Meta employee, somebody who worked with them for 7 years, and you hear that same amount of passion,
if not more.
Yeah, I love to hear it. So that's huge, and it's also a great story to hear that you set out to work at Oculus, you accomplished it, and I think you probably did above and beyond, more than you had anticipated. So for people using Airlink, I always see people, and I also saw you on Twitter before, helping people troubleshoot Airlink. I'll always Reddit thread. Sometimes it's virtual desktop versus Airlink, or Airlink tips or anything like that. So for any of our listeners who use Airlink, maybe they don't run into issues now, or maybe they have had a bump in the road before. Do you have any general tips to kind of optimize using Airlink for users at home?
Yeah. So I think some of the issues that people often run into. So if you're having an issue ever starting it for the first time, a good thing to do is to check if your IP address on your PC is visible or pingable from another device. That 9 times out of 10 is the issue for people. They have some firewall setup or VPN, and that's hard to diagnose through other means. The other ones are, there's a really funny issue sometimes where if your 2.4G network and your 5G network have the same name, they sometimes get switched up. And so one of the performance troubleshooting can be to kind of change the name of 2.4G of your 2.4G network so you only can connect to 5G. And by the way, I apologize in advance if any of these are out of date. But the other one I definitely want to mention is for people, a reason for a big differential sometimes is if you use Steam. There can be performance challenges specifically if you launch a game. If you go into Airlink, you launch the Steam home environment, and then you launch a game out of that. It is not Steam's fault. It is the fault of the underlying software. But what you could do instead is launch the app from the Steam desktop environment or use a tool like Oculus Killer.
Okay, so don't load up the Steam virtual
I've actually
environment.
heard the Steam issue before.
Yep, and that's a big tip, and
It's a huge one.
I love stuff like that, and I also hear sometimes I'll read people debate. Do I upgrade my router? Do I upgrade my modem? Is it the amount of devices I have on my network where my computer's all the way over there? What factors, in your opinion, are the biggest? How close you are to your computer. If you're going to upgrade anything, what should you upgrade? Is it even worth upgrading? Yada yada.
Yeah, if you're going to upgrade anything, well, it depends on what your problem is, but you should look at a lot of things before you try to upgrade your router. A lot of mid-range routers are good. There's a couple that are bad, but the community's done a pretty good job of creating a guide for that. The biggest problem a lot of people have is they aren't in a such situation where they can easily wire their router to their PC, and that makes the biggest difference. It's not even just about the distance from the router to the PC, it's about having that wired connection.
Okay. I'm trying to make mental notes here. I'm definitely gonna have to listen back to this one.
My pad's only 3/4 full.
No, so that's huge, and I love that your advice is, hey, let's look at the environment before you go right into upgrading equipment, which is so often I'll see people suggest that, hey, get the most expensive or the newest router or whatever, and there's a lot more clearly that goes into that than just that. So the next question actually comes from one of our longtime listeners and also one of our Patreon supporters. He's known on our Discord as Shoes. Obviously, that's not his real name, but that's how we'll refer to him here.
I wish it was.
Yeah. Hey, that would be a pretty badass name, It was actually funny. I think for a time on our Discord, he was Slow Shoes, and on Reddit, he was Fast Shoes. Something like that. Maybe I have it backwards. But this next question comes from him. He wanted to know, was Airlink a response to Virtual Desktop? And what is the feeling internally about Virtual Desktop? And what does Virtual Desktop do well? So kind of a 3-part question there, but we'll start with just the first part. Was Airlink a response to Virtual Desktop?
Airlink was not a response to Virtual Desktop, and it was Virtual Desktop was not treated as a competitor to Airlink.
I always love to hear that. I kind of have more of an attitude in the current size of the VR industry that there's no room for wars or competition. That's how everybody burns each other down to the ground. So that's great to hear. And then, what would you say that, Airlink does well over Virtual Desktop?
Well, I mean, they are a partner, and I don't want to disparage anybody that's on the platform. I would say that, outside of specifics, what I am proud of Airlink doing well is I think it's very good at tracking accuracy. I think it's people talk about that sometimes, but they're not sure there's anything technical about that. I think that Airlink is, in fact, very good at having sort of accurate motion and movement. I also think it's pretty good at smoothing over kind of small hitches and frame drops.
Yeah, so sounds like you're a fan of both. So that's always cool to hear straight from the creator themselves. It's like kind of use cases for each one. So that's definitely really cool. And so we often talk about cloud gaming. There's no cloud
quite frequently.
Yeah, there's no service for it natively through the Quest. You see services like Shadow, PC is one. Then I think Pluto Sphere just dropped. We've always talked hypothetically, something like Airlink with a natively built, cloud service in the headset would be a no-brainer. I would subscribe to that in a heartbeat. As somebody who's kind of now has a little bit of experience in wireless technology, is that even something that you feel like is possible in today's technology? Do you think that there's a future in cloud gaming like that on the Quest 2 or
even a reason?
Yeah. Or do you think it's something, maybe in the future, but not now?
I think it's extremely possible. And I just want to preface this by saying I'm not talking about anybody specific technology. This is technology agnostic.
Yeah.
I definitely think it's possible. I think a lot of people have this perception that cloud gaming hasn't really taken off, and VR is the harder version of that, and so we have to surpass a lot of other obstacles in order to get there later on. But if you think about it, one of the limitations for normal cloud gaming is push button latency. You have a back and forth time that makes that very long and noticeable. But in VR, we have a lot of motion stuff like Beat Saber doesn't press buttons at all. And we have, VR systems tend to use tools like prediction to make latency go away. So for cloud, imagine if you had a system where you knew the person when the person was making the motion to push the button, and you could predict ahead of time that they're going to push that button. You could make that latency a lot smaller.
So you think it's even more feasible
More
for
realistic
VR than cloud?
Well, I think that the reasons people think that it's sci-fi aren't really, based in reality.
That gets me excited. And again, to be clear with what you prefaced with at the start, this doesn't mean that it's something in the work or anything that you know about, or you're just saying theoretically, you don't see a reason why not.
Unless somebody starts screaming it can never be done, then we know who's going to do it. So I'll know who to be watching.
To me, I say it's a no-brainer. I would be the first one to sign
about
up.
it all the time. It's like, to me, it's truthfully the future of how it should be. I just didn't know if it was really realistic.
Yeah, something that was even possible. So it's good to hear from somebody with experience that, it is possible. And you look at services like Cloud PC or Pluto Sphere, they exist, but in the end, you still do need to boot it up off of a regular PC, and then you connect to it. If you were able to go natively through your headset,
that'd be
and then
ridiculous.
Just PCVR game through the cloud like that, and through cloud gaming, I think it would be even more of a game changer. Like I keep saying, sign me up on day one. So a little off cusp here, but how long ago was it now that you left Meta?
Left in October.
Geez, that time goes by so fast.
Yeah,
I remember seeing the post on Twitter. I keep referencing it. You were definitely a really good Twitter follow to have. Always Airlink tips. You did a really good job engaging with the community and kind of getting advice or not advice, but what are people struggling on and everything like that. Totally understandable if it's a little bit of a personal thing, but are you able to discuss a little bit, why you took the leave, or is that something, you'd rather keep to yourself?
I can give kind of a cagey answer. I think there were always reasons to stay and leave. And there came a point when, it was really important, I could tell, to kind of address problems and do some particular things. But if I did them in the way I thought I needed to do them, it might be, it might not be great for my career growth after that. So I kind of made a timeline for myself and did what I did so that I could, get done what I need to get done for a project I cared about and leave on my own terms.
That's awesome.
No, it makes total sense.
And it's always cool to hear when it's done on your terms. I'm sure anytime you make a change in life, it's sad saying bye to people and everything like that, but it's always good to do it on your own terms versus when needed or anything like that.
Oh, definitely.
I think so.
So geez, October to April, it's already been 6 months. Wow, that's crazy to think that that October was 6 months ago. So what have these 6 months been like? I'm sure the last 7 years have been nothing but hard work.
A grind.
Yeah. So has it just been R&R? You brewing up new projects? What's the last 6 months kind of been like for you?
Oh, I've been super productive. It's been wonderful. I've been doing a few things. So I've been working on some VR projects with a group of people that hopefully I'll talk about someday. And then I've been doing some open source stuff for VR. And thirdly, I've been doing some sort of side partner projects with people. So the one I'm working on right now is with Reboot Imagine. They do LBE centers, and we're working on some new wireless tech.
Bring the wireless tech to pretty much VR arcades then, right?
Something like that.
Oh, that's going to be
implying that. Just
guessing.
Just
Just working as a side thing. No, that's huge. I think that's a whole, besides the consumer industry, which I guess arcades are consumer, but I would say that that's enterprise, besides us consumers directly being able to use wireless VR for high quality experiences for a business. Oh man,
Mm-hmm.
that's a game changer. So I'm actually, don't take this personal. If I was you, I would have taken the last 6 months and been chilling, drinking some pina coladas.
Did you hear anything thus far
Yeah,
that equates to I'm just gonna put my feet up and do nothing?
So no,
I've not heard that.
Yeah, I actually almost was expecting your initial statement of, "Oh, I've been super productive," to be a hint of sarcasm, but then it came like, "Oh my God, there's no sarcasm in that at all. You have been super productive." So it's been no R&R, right to projects, and it sounds like you're in your mind you want to stay in the industry of VR.
Yeah, I got to keep going.
See, I love to hear that
That's that passion that you can't fake it.
Yeah.
You either have a passion for what you do and a love of what you do, or it's just not going to show. And
well, look at those ripple effects. If you didn't experience that DK1, that might have affected what you did in college or your drive of what you're going to pursue after. That would have affected, for one, your personal work life, but also for us as consumers. Like I said, then we're not going to have a service like Airlink. Who knows, whatever the hell you're working on with those three. It sounds like, could be a lot of good stuff if past results or anything. So just that ripple effect of that one DK1 experience led to Airlink, led to now whatever you're working on, led to your next decade of your life.
Which pretty much we can all benefit from too.
Yeah.
So it's not even something that's like, you could never use or have. I mean, that's incredible.
So, $1 million question: what headset do you mainly use?
I mainly use the Quest 2.
Wow, I was wondering if it was going to be Quest 2 or the Quest Pro.
I was waiting to hear something that nobody.
Yeah, hey, I can't tell you what I use.
Yeah, I can't even show you.
Have you used the Quest Pro? Out of curiosity, we're Quest 2 as well.
A little bit. Yeah, I have. I used it, and I've used it a couple of times since I left.
Yeah, so it seems like a good headset. Like I said, we haven't bit the bullet and
I'm
dived in
for Q3.
Yeah, at this point, with all the rumors and everything like that about Q3 coming this year, I think it's worth it to hold off on. But the controllers, I won't lie, the controllers are definitely tempting me on that Quest Pro. So,
well,
how often would you say you use VR at this point? Would you say you're like a weekly user, or are you in that sucker every day?
Probably every day.
Mostly at this point for gaming or work, 50-50. I know I kind of asked a little bit earlier, but
probably it's hard to say 50-50, but I would say that, like, as far as my gaming in general, it's like maybe this week it's probably 50-50 flat versus VR, but I would say that VR might be the minority. It's probably more like 30% VR. But I'm doing it at least once a week, if not once a day.
That's awesome.
And all in between.
Yeah, and again, I loved your reaction of, oh, that's no excuse, in the beginning. But we've heard it from so many developers and people who work professionally in VR of like, yeah, there's no gaming after. So I definitely love to hear that. Do you have like a specific genre that you tend to gravitate towards? Whether that be shooters or social VR games or.
Yeah, well, in VR specifically, I really liked sort of story-driven games, and I was really into rhythm games when I needed to be in order to figure out stuff for like controllers. I usually really like shooting games in 2D, but I realized for a lot of development I wasn't playing shooting games in VR, so I've changed that more recently.
Yeah, story-based games have sometimes some of my favorite ones. We just reviewed Not for Broadcast VR, which is definitely an interactive story, and then you look at gems like Red Matter 2.
Oh, that's not even funny.
I Expect You to Die.
I love them all.
Yeah.
I loved Peaky Blinders was fun.
Something that kind of surprised me a lot in VR is I thought I was going to love hack and slash a lot more than I do, which was great like the first 6 months of VR. But I think over time, the more I play VR, the more I really enjoy strategy experiences. Like you look at something like Ghost Signal, or I
literally love it all. I saw a debate on board games like should they. I think you fired that one off on LinkedIn, and there were some people saying that it doesn't really have a place in VR. I think, but
Yeah, you know what? That's once a little bit of a random one, but just
Yeah,
to
I'm
get your
curious on
opinion
the
on it.
opinion
Actually,
on it.
yeah, I've been debating with people recently about board games. There's a lot of people who say that they don't feel like that they would work in VR, whereas we're a little bit more in the camp of board games.
Why wouldn't
In
they?
VR, you can make the board game come to life. I don't have to just use my imagination. I don't have to remember the pieces or the rules or anything like that. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think that board games are something that would work with the consumer public, or are you a little bit more on the side of it's not really utilizing the potential of VR?
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's utilizing the potential of VR or not,
That's
in
my
my
attitude as
opinion.
well. Yeah.
But I think it would work. I know people that are doing weekly poker nights in VR, and it seems to be a similar principle. If you want to, I don't, people do it on the 2D screen all the time to try to, play games with people from other areas, but it doesn't work nearly as well. There's clear limitations. You can have almost the same experience in VR.
Music to my ears.
Perfect answer for me.
Yep.
I was actually hoping we weren't just going to get shut down
And be
so
like,
bad.
You idiots. Why would you ever think that would?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Move
sometimes
with the times, not the past, huh?
I've heard a lot of people say that they don't feel that anything top down in VR works, that it's like more 3D gaming than VR. But exactly what you said. I'm going to steal that quote of, well, it doesn't need to utilize all the.
Well, listen, guys, I'm not like an indie VR dev, so you're probably talking to people that have gone through a lot of trials and been rejected for their ideas.
That's true. You work on more of the software side, but in the end, you still are a VR fan and consumer, and you've seen the industry, to say the least.
Mhm. I would say working at Meta or Oculus or Facebook is pretty big accolades in itself. I don't care what you do there.
Yeah,
It's like I don't know many people that actually had worked there.
So we definitely appreciate you. Our listeners, some of them know this, but we record on weekends, so we're definitely the most
stealing valuable time from our guests.
Yes, we're always the most selfish interviewers, where we say, "Hey, come join us on a weekend." Take time away from your personal life. So we definitely appreciate you coming on and spending this time with us. And I don't know where you're located. If you're anywhere like we are, we're currently dealing with an insane heat wave. I'm dying where I'm at as well. Something
I'm in Texas. We've been okay.
It doesn't get warm in Texas.
You're used to the heat wave. It's a constant.
I was in Texas in August. It's hot. It was humid, and everyone told me that Texas isn't humid, but I'm telling you, Texas was humid in August.
Yeah, we're in Massachusetts.
Windows sweating, humid.
Hot and cold is definitely a range of perception, to say the least. But something I got to ask, before we let you go, where do you see the industry of VR being in the next 10 years? Do you think it's going to continue to grow at the rate it has? It's going to dominate? Do you think things are going to stagnate? In your guess, where are things going to be in the next 10 years?
I always hate predicting, but I'll try. I guess I would predict that either, it's like 10 years from now, it's going to be alive or it isn't. And if it is alive, it's probably going to be common. And if it is common, people are going to be struggling with the fact that we got this far by making very specific experiences good while pretending it worked in a general way. Everyone's going to have to rewrite the whole software stack all over again.
Damn. So
the most technical answer I've heard for.
No, this is going to be one that I'm ingesting it live, but I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this with a notepad.
Well, yeah, there's some interviews you can call them notepad. Like, make sure you have a notepad.
Yeah, I'm probably going to
listen. There's no way you're going to suck it all in a quick listen.
You have a wealth of knowledge, and you've definitely thrown some tidbits out very casually. So I'm going to have to go back and, like I said, fine scoop this one. This was a lot of really good info in this episode. So we definitely appreciate you taking your time, like I said, coming on, joining us here. Stratus, before we let Amanda go, do you have anything that you want to ask?
So yeah, the only thing I think I the amount of enthusiasm, the hustle that's involved. I think people are going to hear this, and it's a path. It's inspirational. We love asking people, like, what's the best advice you would give someone who's really young and wants to get involved in the industry. And hearing these little tidbits that nothing was seemingly handed to you. These were things that you directly had a goal in mind and went after. So
no, and I think something I want to stress too, because it's you said your accolades very casual and everything. You're very humble about your work ethic or what you put out, but not everybody's able to set out a goal like, hey, I want to work for Oculus and make the sacrifices or the steps needed in life. I think for somebody who's, maybe in college now and they're figuring out what they want, I think stories like that can be very inspirational because
Well, it proves you can do it too.
Mhm.
It's not like somebody closes a door and you just say no or whatever. But I do think, on a side note, that if it wasn't this, we'd probably be watching Amanda in Hollywood, because if she's got the theater background in,
well, let's be real,
we probably already have.
6 months off and she has 3 side projects
Yep.
brewing. So like I said, you're very humble about, your professional accolades, but, I'm excited to see what comes next with these 3 projects and maybe whatever the hell else
Coming down the road, 'cause it's not
obviously.
stopping there for sure.
So we definitely appreciate you coming on. Like I said, spending the time with us, educating us a little bit about Airlink, some tips with it. And thank you again, Amanda.
Thank you so much. It's
Awesome.
been good.